And I've got something really exciting for you today. For me, a combination of using bait and one of the most visibly engaging techniques that I know of, chasing luderick using weeds and float in the estuary. It's shore-based, it's easy, and I reckon if you follow what we're going to show you today, you'll be catching fish before you know it. Let's get into it. Oh yeah! Catching luderick, the unconventional style. I grew up being taught the very proper way to catch luderick, which was with the old centre pin reels and the big 10-foot blackfish rods, string weed and floats. I'm down away from home, fishing Port Stephens at the moment, and I've got my travel 2-piece 7-foot spin rod. And at the moment, it's having to do as a luderick rod, but it's doing a good job and I'm having fun. Beautiful fish. I think sometimes the fish that you grow up catching and learning to fish always hold a special place for you. And these guys, definitely like that for me. I was about 12, 13 years old. Family holidays down the south coast of New South Wales. Parents would let me go for days at a time and fish around places like Durras Estuary, around Bateman's Bay. And when I wasn't chasing flathead and bream and tailor and stuff like that, I resorted to learning how to catch these things. Anyway, I'm going to get this guy back in the water. Bit of shelter and he'll make his way out to join his mates. There he goes now. That's the way home. See ya. An easy fish to catch really on a shore-based platform. Around winter time, sort of late autumn to winter, they start running into the estuaries from the oceans and they'll school up anywhere where you've got a bit of ledge and structure and a place where they can sit and congregate and get food coming past them. If you want to catch them, that's the first part of the equation. Work out where they're going to be holding and then present a weed bait. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. Time to re-rig and get into it. I've selected this place to fish for a couple of reasons. First bit, it looks like the kind of spot you're going to find your luderick. I've got a nice rocky platform. It's a nice, falls across a nice ledge into some deeper water, and I've got a fair bit of current flow moving out, and it's not that far from the entrance to the ocean. It's a prime place that I think I'm going to find a few luderick early on in the season. Case now of just getting my bait down to the right depth and then creating a nice drifting bait through the zone or that length of the ledge that I think are going to hold the fish. I've found where I think they're going to be. Now it's a case of just starting to work it, see if I can find one or two. Probably a bit of a better fish this one, a little weight to it. A few rocks to navigate him over, which is the one benefit of the old style longer rod. You just got a bit more leverage to steer fish around obstacles, but certainly still do the job with spin rod. 7-foot light spin rod. It's a pretty good tool for doing this. It's nice and light. Enjoy the fight of the fish. Got enough length to cast a float around. They're pretty fish. Very distinctive stripes. A relative of the drummer, the rock blackfish. And they don't fight quite as brutally hard and dirty as the drummer on the rocks, but they still put up a good account for themselves. Nice big tail, big powerful shoulder. They're very small mouths, which means you've got to cater your tackle towards them. Small hooks. They're vegetarians as well, which is why we're using the weed baits. This one will go back as well. I'll just run you through the rig that I'm using today to chase these luderick off the rocks. To start with, I might talk you through rod and reel. Now, this is very much not the traditional style of outfit for chasing luderick. When I grew up, I learned to do it with old centre pin reels and long 10-foot rods that were very specifically designed to chasing luderick with floats. I'm holidaying at the moment in Port Stephens, and this is a great little travel rod. It's a 2-piece 7-foot outfit. It's a 3 to 5 kilo rod. Fits into a very small tube, which means it's easy on the plains. Good for flathead and bream, but also good for this style of fishing. It's very easily adapted to chasing Luderick on floats. I've matched it with a 2500 size reel, little Abu Garcia. I've got 4-pound braid, and I'm using a 6-pound leader, which is a really nice light line, which means I can cast a light float very easily. Now I'll get down to the business end of proceedings. It looks complex, but it's not. And the key part of the rig is obviously your float, and I really like these pencil or stick floats, just because they move very easily through the water. So when a fish takes your bait, it doesn't feel a lot of resistance. It's a free running float, and it's stopped by a stopper. Now, any good tackle store will retail float stoppers, and they're simply a case of rigging that onto your main line before you put your float on. And the beauty of these is that while you're fishing, you can slide them up and down your line to keep your bait at exactly the designated depth you think the fish are going to be holding. To support that float, I use split shot. Now, the beauty of split shot is when I first start fishing, I can put on 1 or 2 bits, 2 little split shots, crimp them on, and the first few casts, you'll see how your float sits. Now, today I started with 2 and my float sat on a bit of a diagonal, whereas what I really wanted was it sitting nice and straight and about that high out of the water. So what I did was crimped on another split shot. Next cast, beautiful. Just that little bit of float lets me see what's going on, but it's really easy for a fish to pull it down underneath the water. And then 10 to 20 centimeters beneath my split shot, I've got a little number 8 hook. That is the rig that you need to catch a Luderick. Nice and simple, but very effective. Late autumn and winter is the time that your Luderick start entering your estuary, and what they've been doing before that is hanging around the ocean rocks and spending the majority of their time feeding on cabbage. And what you'll find when you are fishing for them in the estuary is that the longer they've been in the estuary, so the later winter gets on, the more they'll start eating sometimes some of your finer weed, your green weed that lives in the estuary. And that can be a bit tricky to find at times, but that's always been the challenge of Luderick fishermen. But the beauty about early season fish is that as they come into the estuary, they're still accustomed to eating this sea cabbage or the stuff which you find out in your ocean rocks, and it's readily available in most places. And go and find a few chunks of that, because early in the season, you'll well and truly catch the fish on this. And there's a bit of a trick to rigging it, which I'll show you now. It can be a little bit tricky rigging this stuff, and one of the things that I like to do when I'm actually collecting your cabbage down on the rocks is that the way you find it growing is, rather than just ripping away at it and getting just the leaf, I like to get my fingernails right down onto the rock and try and pry away a little bit of the root system. You'll find it's often on some licheny type material which sits on the rocks, and it's actually a little bit tougher than the rest of the leaf. And what that means is it gives you a bit of a base to pin this stuff to a hook pretty well. And that's obviously the first place that I shove a hook through, and you'll find it's nice and gritty. And having pushed it through, I then like to just pull my hook through that hard bit so that the eye goes actually through it, and what it'll do is it'll hold that in place a lot better. Then it's a case of just pulling away some of the excess, getting rid of that, or using it as your burley, and then wrapping a few leaves over and pulling them down on top of the hook. And what you'll find fairly quickly, once you've trimmed it up, give it a bit of a haircut, you'll find a bait that stays on the hook pretty well. It's nice and rigid and drifts around very much like a natural bit of vegetation floating around the estuary, and that's what these guys are sitting around looking for. Drift that past them, and you're well on your way to catching some Luderick. When it comes to a little bit of technique to catch your Luderick in the estuary, having found your spot, you're typically going to be fishing a little bit of a drift, an area where you think the fish are concentrating, and you're going to drift your bait through where they are. So what you want to do is cast 5 to 10 metres above that zone. I like to, as soon as the float is landed, throw your line down on top of the water so it doesn't end up everywhere and start dragging your float badly. Having done that, slowly mend your line and let that float drift naturally through the area where you think the fish are going to be, and just keep an eye on it. It's a very engaging style of fishing, but any sign of that float doing something differently, watch it the moment it starts sliding underneath. If in doubt, strike. Sometimes it's a rock, sometimes it's a fish, and very quickly you'll work out the exact depth you need to have that bait going, where your stopper should be, and where you're going to be catching fish. Watch the float, get your drift right, they'll be catching fish in no time. Yep, gotcha. Finally. Oh, it's getting aerial on me. It's not a bad fish either. Changed location from before because the tide is dropping and the rocks are getting a bit exposed. Cruised around the corner and the change of light gave me the option to suddenly see these big bronze flashes. Told me exactly where to fish, and sometimes you don't just have to look for colour change in the water. If you've got a good set of polarised sunglasses on, you'll actually see the fish rolling and flashing because that's the way they feed. They get in around patches of vegetation sometimes and they'll either get stuff sifting past or you actually see them rolling on rocks and plucking away at the weed which is growing on some of the structure wherever you're fishing. So those flashes are very, very good when you're looking for luderick. They've said, here we are, just put a float and a bit of weed in the right spot and you're away. All right, beauties of shore-based fishing. It's always an adventure trying to land fish. It's part of the fun in my books. And there you go, he's beauty. Lovely estuary luderick. He's fallen to my trap. My little bait of cabbage floated down through that area there. I could actually see those fish flashing. That was the exciting bit about it. I was actually fishing deeper on the ledge and started suddenly seeing flashes, and I looked closely at them and they're very bronze when they flash, these guys. They give themselves away, and the beauty about wearing some good sunglasses is that sometimes show you exactly where the fish are, if not the structure. Aren't they lovely? That's a particularly satisfying capture because I actually spotted it. I almost cast to the fish that I wanted to catch. He was flashing with about 3 others sitting around a rock. And I just managed to put my float above it and just drifted it down. I thought, surely I can't catch a fish that I'm actually seeing flashing, and a second later the float drifted down. Thanks for coming. It's so satisfying, that hook up, when you know you've actually seen what you're after and you can catch it. And today, to help me do that, the old Alpha brand of spotters, the nice emerald glass, which means you just get a very good depth perception and a really good range of colours no matter what the light, whether it's bright sunlight or a bit of a cloudy day like it is today. I can see a lot of stuff in the water, and that certainly helps you catch fish on days, whether you're in a boat or on the shore.
It's Bill Klassen here from The Fishing Show, and if you like this instructional video and want to learn more, it's simple. Go to fishingshowtv.com.au and see a whole host of additional videos.